Good morning, everyone. It looks like we've got several people joining, so we will be starting here in just a couple of, well, not minutes, but just a minute or two. We'll get started. Perfect. All right. So excited, and thank you for joining us this morning for our Sage 100 year-end webinar for the payroll module. My name is Deanna Carrillo, a project manager here at Microaccounting, and I'll support Eva Biddle as she provides the year-end training. You should have received an email with handouts for the presentation either yesterday or earlier this morning. They can also be found in the attachment section of the webinar. Before we begin the presentation, we'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. We have everyone set to listen only mode as we will record the session. Each of you will receive a link to that recording upon conclusion of the event. Since you are muted, please use the question feature to type in any questions, and we'll take periodic breaks to answer them. If you experience any problems during the webinar, you can use the chat feature to note those concerns. So, without further ado, welcome to Microaccounting's 2024 Sage 100 Payroll Module Year-End Training presented by Eva Biddle. Eva, please take it away.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic Thursday morning so far. I got up this morning, looked at the calendar, and just befuddled that it's already December the 12th. So it's just crazy how time flies. But anyway, this morning we're going to talk about year-end processing for the payroll module. So in all the newer versions, like 2018 and higher, payroll can keep and maintain its own history, meaning that you can have, multiple years and go back after you close a year to see check history and stuff underneath the employees. Okay. Throughout the year, as far as you do your quarter end processing, it's not always necessary, to close the quarter before you start your next payroll. Okay. But today we're going to talk about the differences with the quarter four. So again, you're in your handout, and I'm going to be referencing it back and forth, but I've got this one right here. So this is the little document that you guys received. So if you want to make notes as we go along, you can, and I'll kind of tell you and move it when we're doing it. But if you notice that very first section up there says that year-end processing is performed after the last payroll for quarter four. And it prepares for the following payroll year. Okay, so when you're doing it, it's always a good thing to change the accounting date to be the same as the quarter you're closing. Okay, and that's really important with payroll because of certain things that happen, and dates that get reset by the system are going to use this system date. So for payroll, you really want to do that. For the other modules, we recommend you do that. So when you run the reports, or if you go back and look at the reports, it's going to tell you the accounting date is the end of the month or the quarter. Okay. Again, payroll does quarterly and yearly are your closes, where your other modules do accounts payable, AP, inventory, sales order. You do those monthly period in processing. Okay. But for payroll, you only do it quarterly and annually at the end of the year. Now, there is an order to close that you guys were also given. Again, payroll is not done every month, but you do want to go ahead and close the payroll before you close AP or GL quarterly and at the end of the year, because of the fact that with the newer versions of payroll, you could be posting and or creating invoices, so you want to make sure everything's updated and everything's been followed up, okay, up the chain. So, but again, the date, so you change your date right down here on the bottom right. And again, today is December 12th of 2024. This payroll demo is in 2023. I did not redo a whole entire year for 2024, but it is in 2023, but you'll get the gist of the close, okay? But anyway, so that's our first note, is you always want to change it. And it's important, too, that your payroll accruals, so if you're doing like vacation, sick, PTO, and all that other stuff, and you have those set at a calendar year, when you close the year, it's going to use this date to reset the fields in the system. And I'm going to show you these here in a minute, and you can make notes on that sheet if necessary. Okay. We always recommend the second paragraph there just kind of tells you about you should have a current backup for all the modules before you do year-end processing. And, you want to keep it for historical purposes in case you ever have to restore from backup. Now, prior to Payroll 2018, we used to always, at this point in time when we did the webinar, we always told you guys to do a backup company of your payroll. Okay, that's really no longer necessary as far as for keeping history and running quarterly reports, printing your W-2s and all that other stuff. Okay, so it's 100%, you don't have to do it. But if you ever wanted to do it, that's where you would do that up here in the Library Master. You do have to have access to Library Master to create these company backups. You can create, you could just call it like a backup company here. You have to give it a name, okay? And then you do have to give it a type, okay? You can't save it without a type. But as you do that, then you could just hit this little copy button over here on the right. I'm going to move this bar. I don't think you can see it, but I'm going to go ahead and move it out of my way. If I hit this copy, then it's going to ask you to save this company, the record, and then now it's going to ask you what you want to copy. So you pick the copy that you're going to copy from. So I'm going to do my year-end webinar class. And then, I can choose which modules I want to copy over. Okay, if you choose another company, like if I were to choose a different one, it's going to show you all the modules that you have installed. These companies only have little ones. Let me do a big one. But if you do a bigger company, it would show you all the modules installed. So you can pick and choose which ones you want to copy. But that would create your backup company. If you're going to do backups, you do always want to make sure that the source and the destination are correct. Okay, I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and I still always to this day, before I hit this proceed and even after I hit the proceed, I always check source company, destination, source company, destination. Okay, you don't want to have 25 people in your office when you're doing this, because you could cause inadvertently a mess if you're not paying attention. So again, but this is how you would create the backup company, and then you could go into that company whenever you wanted to. Again, with the payroll, with it being that now we can keep it based on number of years, that copy is not as necessary as it used to be. Okay. We're also going to talk about Atrix here in a minute. And if you are creating those backup companies, when you do go to process your Atrix W-2s, you probably want to do that from your live company code. Okay. And the reason being is that if you ever have to do like a reprint of a W-2, or if you want to go back and look at the historical stuff in Atrix, all of that is saved by company code. So so you just want to be mindful of that, because if you have to go reprint a W-2, you need to remember which company you ran the Atrix from. So we just always suggest, and it helps the folks in support and everything else, if you run those Atrix ones, Atrix wizards from your live company code, so all the history and everything is all in one place. Okay, if you do it from your backups every year, then you're always having to go back to whatever company it is to get to that W-2 historical information, because Atrix does save that out there for you. So again, we always make a note that you want to run the Atrix from your live company code. So it's just a little bit easier. Another thing on the companies, if you do create a backup, the next thing you'd have to do is you'd have to go down here to security, and you'd have to make sure that whoever, because you just created a new company, you're either going to have to come in here and assign the new company code to whomever can get into that archive company, Okay. Or if they're doing all companies and you don't want them in that payroll backup, you're going to have to add it as a line here and hit this exclude. Okay. So just be mindful if you create the backup companies, A, that you're doing it correctly, and B, that after you create that copy company, that you check security and make sure that that is good, because you don't want to create a backup company and then all of a sudden everybody can access it. And then we've got a mess on our hands. But again, that's just kind of what you could do for those. Okay. So those are kind of some housekeeping type things that you want to be mindful of for the payroll before you start the process. Then in this document, it is going to go into here the rest of the things. So now we're going to talk about what actually happens when you go through the year-end close in Sage. Okay. So what's going to happen is, and these are all I'm going to jump over to my Sage and show you all these, but if you're taking notes on that piece of paper or, just whatever, these are the bullets that we're about to go over, is all these little bullets as to what actually happens during year-end close. Okay, so we're going to go through these 6 little bullets here. Okay, that's next. So what we're going to do here is, again, I'm going to go into my payroll module, okay? And if you notice, when I went into the payroll module, it changed to 12/31/2023 because I've already set my date for that, okay? If I go back to Library Master, where I was just a minute to make those copies, this one is always set as of today's date. It's the system date, okay? So see how that date changes there? And that's what you could do with all the modules, really, when you start, period end processing or year end processing, is you can have dates differently for each module. Okay, so I'm going to go back over to payroll. I'm verifying my date, 12/31/2023. And then now I'm going to go into that first bullet, is the employee maintenance. So if you are paying your employees direct deposit, and I'm going to go ahead and pick on Adrian Bullock, is going to be one of our main people we pick on here. But if you go over here, she's set up for direct deposit over here on the right. Okay, so if you click the little more button on the top right, that's where you can actually look at the direct deposit setup information and information regarding that. So I can see her line of all of her bank accounts, her routing numbers, etc. And then over here, you're going to see that deposited in her direct deposits year-to-date number, okay? Now, she didn't start this until April of 2023, okay, because that's when she actually started using direct deposit, but the year-to-date number is posted there. And when you do a year-end process, this is zeroed out, so your next year can start. So that's, again, why it's important to do year-end processing and payroll before you start, the next year, because all these numbers get wiped out. Okay. So I'm going to, so not wiped out, it goes back, it resets to 0. Okay. So that's our first bullet. Terminated employees. Now, in the old days, if you've been on payroll for years and years and years and years, every time you did a period end, terminated people were gone. Okay. They were just basically gone. But starting in version 2018 and higher, okay, that is where we're going to see that if they're terminated, they may stick around. Well, they're going to stick around for the number of years you're keeping your payroll history. Okay, so in the next little section, we're going to go over the setup options. And when we go over those setup options, I'm going to show you where to check how many years you're keeping history. But that number is the trigger. So every time you do a year-end close, it's keeping track of the number of years you're keeping history. And once you exceed those number of years, that's when the historical years start dropping off. Okay, so you're always going to maintain, if it's 5, you're always maintaining 5 years of history. So if you started payroll in 2020, at the end of 2025, when you start 2026, because now you've just blown your 5 years, right? That's when 2020 is going to drop off. Okay, so it's looking at the number of years you're keeping history, then applying it to what's being deleted. But you do have to keep and maintain your number of years of history as the base. Okay. So this terminated employee, may not go away this year because they have pay history for 2023. And then if you're keeping it for how many years back, one of these years may start to drop off based on the number of years that you're maintaining your history. Okay. So terminated people are purged when you do a year end, but they have to meet the historical number of years requirement first. Okay, so you will see some of those stick around from year to year until it reaches your number of years. And once it exceeds that, then the terminated people are gone. Okay, same thing. Now, there are also another type of inactive employees. So this guy, Lori Lane, is marked as inactive. So if I select this record, when I go over here, it's going to say, her status, she's inactive. Okay. And that's the date, she went inactive on 10/20 and she took like a personal leave. She just left, but she may come back. So instead of terminating her, I'm just going to mark her as inactive. Okay. So you can have those different statuses for the employee. And the employee status is over here on the bottom left. Okay. You're either going to have inactive, active, or terminated. But that's where those settings are going to do. So the inactive people will stick around. Terminated people will be removed based on the number of years of history. So there has to be no history associated with the record before a terminated employee is removed. Okay. Now deductions kind of work the same because it does check your history. Okay. So if I go look at deductions, there's a couple things that happen. So if I go back to my Adrian, she's my main person I'm picking on. If I go to Adrian, and if I go over here to deductions, she's got a couple different deductions going on. Okay, this first one is a 401k amount. So if I highlight that deduction, and if I hit the little green button over here to drill down into it, if I drill down into it, this is where I'm going to see the information. Okay, so her amount, each time is $500. That's her rate or her amount. Her goal is $18,000. And of that goal, she's met down here at the bottom, $13,000. So she has $5,000 left to go. Okay. So because she has a balance of $5,000, there is and again, when we get to the setup options, I'm going to show you, but in the setup options for each deduction, there's a little checkbox that you can click. And that checkbox is going to tell the system that when you do year-end processing, does it start the goal back over at $18,000 or does it continue with their balance of $5,000 going forward? So this is a 401k, right? So at the end of the year, she can contribute up to $18,000 this year, but next year she gets to start over and try to reach the $18,000 goal again. So this deduction type needs to be clicked that it's going to reset because every year they get a chance to reach that goal, but they can't exceed that based on IRS. And again, I can't even tell you if that 18,000 is up to date. It's semi up to date. But it's been a while since I've done actual live processing for payroll and have looked at that. But anyway, those are your numbers there. And then so she's got 13 of the 18,000. This one will reset back to where she can get up to 18,000, not carry over the $5,000 balance. Okay. Now, if you look at this other one, this is an employee loan. So if I look at this one, we loaned her some money. She got in a tight spot. We loaned her some money. And if you notice, it kind of tells you, she's doing $75, every time. And if you notice, there's some numbers in here that she's taken for May, June, July, August. So it looks like, they're biweekly. So she got, an extra paycheck in that month there in June and in December. But this particular deduction, she borrowed $5,000. Okay. She's paying it back $75 a paycheck. And she has a balance of $3,650. So for this particular deduction, we don't want that to go back to zero. right? And we don't want it to go back to, we don't want it to clear out because she still owes us the money, and we don't want it to go back to 5,000 because she doesn't owe us 5,000, she owes us 3,650. So that's that little checkbox that I'm going to show you in a minute as to whether or not they should reset. Okay, so any deductions, and it used to be only pension plans that had that checkbox to reset. So that's why we added that note there on your papers. It used to just be pension plans. It says formerly pension plan type only, but now pretty much any of the deductions that have a balance or a goal, that goal there can be reset back at the end of the year to reach or match the limit or the goal amount. Okay. If not, then it's set back to the balance that's left. So now, if the balance is zero, the deduction is no longer applied. Okay. Now, in this case, after we do the year-end close, you're going to see like this guy right here. She doesn't have a goal or a balance. She did, 180 throughout the year, but there's no goal or balance on this one. Now, this one, after we close, we're still going to see this deduction underneath the employee because of all this historical stuff, okay? But if you have let me show you this other person. If I go to another employee, and that person I need to be is Margaret Delaney. So if I go into here, this loan, so if I look at her loan, there's no information for the year. Okay, so that's where our number of years is going to be checked. And as long as this surpasses the number of years of history we're keeping, the zero line deduction would be removed from her record. But sometimes if you close, you may say, well, that deduction didn't go away and they don't owe us any more money. Well, it's because of your historical number of years constraints. So eventually it will drop off. But since we're keeping so many years of history, we need to be able to reproduce check information based on that number of years, direct deposit information, like the deduction information, stuff like that. So since we're keeping all that information, it's keeping that based on our number of years for history. Okay. Then let me show you one more thing, and then we'll pause to see if we have any other questions. Okay, so that's a bullet in there. And then the calendar year. Now this one, I'm going to go back to Adrian so you can see this one. But if I go back over here to Adrian, and if I go to her benefits, you're going to see that this last date reset. Okay, that says 4/10/2022. Okay, so this date will be reset, but it's going to use this year-end date when I do the year-end processing. It's going to use my payroll date to fill that in. Okay, so this company has switched to, a daily calendar type thing, and the deductions reset every calendar year. So when I close 2023, this date last reset is going to go to 12/31/2023, and then anything that they can carry over. So see, like the carryover, what's been accrued, what's been used, and the hours available are all going to be checked based on the time off codes assigned to the employee, and those numbers may change depending on how you have your time off codes set up. Okay, so it is going to be using that date. So again, that's why it's very important to make sure your payroll date is 12/31/2023 or 2024 for this year when you're doing year-end closing. Okay, and then again, any historical records. So like if I go over here to like the pay history, this is all for 2023. Again, I can go back in and see information for 2022. So that's where this is checked to see how I can go all the way back to 2021. So I can go back to all these different years, but eventually that's going to go to zero once I meet my number of years. Okay, so once I keep and maintain my number of years, then these years are going to start dropping off. Okay, and then the last bullet there, in these setup options, the year is going to be changed and the quarter is going to be reset to 1. So let's take a pause here, see if anyone has any questions on what I've discussed so far.
Eva, at this point, we do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Now, we're going to go check the setup options. Okay, so that's the next thing we're going to do. And then we're going to actually walk through the closing of the system. Okay, and then we're going to take a peek at the Atrix processing. Okay, so those are everything that's going to be checked as far as the employee goes. Okay, then if I go look in the setup options, and the year end is always kind of a good, kind of a good way to check this, or at some point, just make sure you understand how your payroll module is set up and where these parameters are set to. Okay, so if I go over to payroll, then go to the setup folder and go to the payroll options, in the next section, and I'll go ahead and pull up your little paper again. So we've already discussed these little bullets here. Okay, so now we're on down to the bottom section of this first page. And this is where we're going to check the setup options. So this is the second half of page 1 that we're kind of discussing now. Okay, so if you notice on the screen on tab 1, over on the right, it's saying that I'm in year 2023, quarter 4. So every time you do a quarter in processing, that changes. Okay, now that we're at the year, it's actually going to change not only the quarter from 4 to 1, but it's going to change the year from 2023 to 2024. So these guys will be set. And if you ever try to manually change that, you're going to get a pop-up because it doesn't want you to do that. And the reason you're going to get that pop-up saying you shouldn't be doing this is because every time you do a quarter-end processing or a year-end processing, all of those housekeeping things happen. History's purged, the dates are reset. And if you manually do this, none of that stuff is happening. So you're not going to have the same results if you're manually changing your quarters versus actually going through period-end processing. Okay, but you do want to check and maintain what processing year and quarter you're in. Okay, then when I was talking about those time off codes, like the vacation, sick, and personal, that's what these are set to in this company. Down here at the bottom, reset employee time off limits at benefit year end. So, and they changed that to benefit year end because of the second option down here. Okay, because down here you could actually run it versus calendar year or anniversary date. Okay, but this system is on a calendar year. We're going to show you what happens then. But it's looking at these two things. Is it going to go look at all the time off codes and reset it back to the tables? Okay, or the time off code for the employees? And B, when does it do it, at calendar or anniversary? Okay, so that's that second bullet there that we're talking about. Then all that history I was talking about is on tab 6 called History tab. So if I go to tab 6 and look at the History tab, there's a couple things we like to check. The main thing for period end processing is that number of years. So that's where the magical number's happening. Okay, so when I was just back in Adrienne Bullock and I looked on her pay history and could see all of her check information, and I could change it from 2023 to 2022 to 2021, that's when this years is checked. So once you soar past this number, that's when things start to fall off. Same thing with the deductions. That one that was at a zero balance and zero rate for Adrienne is going to stick around because there was history for 2023 and it hasn't surpassed my 5 years. But when I go into that Margaret Delaney, we loaned her some money a long time ago. It has surpassed these 5 years. So therefore, when I close this year, that's going to drop off. Okay. So that's the things you want to check for the history. Now, there's two other bullets, that employee changes to track and the track changes to employee rates. These are also some good things just to check. The employee changes to track is whether or not you're tracking and by this saying all, that means that this particular company is tracking deletions, additions, and changes. Okay, so if you're looking at your setup options after this call and you see that it just says changes, then your audit report is only showing you what changes you have made to an employee. So if you change their address, if you change their phone number, if you change their emergency contact, it's not giving you a report of any time you add or delete employees. Okay, so this is kind of telling you what's on those reports. If you're doing upgrades, especially going into the 2024, there are newer, improved audit report type things, and it's easier to kind of look at it. So again, those, you know, if you're in the middle of an upgrade, or if you're going to upgrade in the future, you'll be hearing about that when we do the upgrade training, because they actually have kind of improved some of that stuff, and it's easier to see. You can kind of see it from the screens, and the way it purges is, you know, it's still done by a roll option, but it also can be done, you know, from, you can kind of access that report differently, but that's in the newer versions of, you have to be on at least 2024 to see that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, that's why we like to mention this, is kind of what type of history you're keeping. And then the additions in detail, you have to either have all up here, or you have to have additions up here to get this to this checkbox. And what that means is it's only for every time you add an employee. And if you add an employee and that box is unchecked, it's just going to say, I added Deanna Carrillo on this date. Okay. If it's in detail, it's going to say, I added Deanna Carrillo. This is her address. This is her phone number. This is her contact information. This is her filing status. I mean, it's going to show all that information. Okay. So additions in detail is going to give you lots more information on those audit reports. If that box unchecked, it's just going to say the person that added it, the date, and who it was, and their employee number. So it's very limited information. Okay. And then the track changes to employee pay rates. That's if you want to track every time you change their hourly rate or their salary. On the screens in employee maintenance, you can see, you know, like their hourly rate. And then when you change it, there's a little comment over on the right that you can type something in. And that's what's being tracked on that employee pay rate change report. So you can go back in and look at that employee pay rate change report for an employee, and you can see every time their pay rate changed, which is good if you're doing like reviews, or if you're, you know, trying to determine if it's time to give raises. And I'm always up for a raise. So anytime anyone wants to give me a raise, that's great. But, you know, you can use that report to kind of see what they were hired at, when was the last time they got a pay rate change, you know, kind of look at that information. So again, these little three boxes don't really do anything with year-end processing, but it's always a good time to look at that, and it's always a good time to understand what's happening in your system. Okay. Now, the other things we want to talk about and show you is some of those things I talked about for the deduction codes. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and go down here to the setup, deduction code maintenance, and I'm going to pull up the 401k one. Okay, so if you notice, this standard amount or rate is set to 0. That's because every employee is going to do a different amount. Okay, so you don't really want to have a default amount set up here. When you apply this deduction to an employee, it's based on what the employee wants or what the employee wishes to contribute. Okay, but that standard limit, that's where that 18,000 comes into play. Okay, now if you notice down here at the bottom, this is that checkbox we were talking about, reset balance at year end. So this one is actually checked. So at the end of the year, if this deduction code is applied to any of the personnel, it's going to go back to be able to contribute for 2024 the 18,000 again. So in Adrienne Bullock's case, she only met 13,000 for 2023. So when we close the year and go back and look at her, she's going to be back up to 18,000 instead of just the 5,000 remaining. Okay, so that's kind of what that reset balance at year end box means. Okay, now while we're on one of these that actually print on the W-2s, you're going to notice apply to W-2 box. Okay, and you can pick your 12 or 14, right? And then you can also pick your codes. So again, this information actually prints on the W-2s. So that's something else you want to, kind of check and make sure you have set, is that the boxes and the codes are correct for the deductions that you need to print on your W-2s. Okay. Then, so you have that guy there. Okay. Then if I go look at the loan deduction, this one doesn't have it set to reset the balance at year end. So in the case of our, one that still owes us money, it's just going to go to the balance. It's not going to reset it back to her limit or her rate. And in this case, you can't even see limits or goals here because, again, if someone does, ask for a loan, it's going to be different amounts. So you don't want to have a default limit up here or goal, for everyone getting money if anyone borrows money from you, because it's always going to change. Okay. So again, that's kind of how this one is. So just want to be mindful of those, boxes. So you can scroll through all your deductions by using the little arrows just to kind of look and see how they're all going. Okay. This one's going to box 14. Okay. So again, now box 14, all companies kind of use this differently. I do have some companies that use it, and they use it to report information to the employees. It's typically informational purposes. However, some employers use that to print amounts, that should be entered somewhere else on your return. Examples are like officers and stuff like that, or like if you're paying different types of insurances and stuff, they need to have a record of that to give to their CPAs and, whoever's preparing their taxes on that end. So that's why you have the option to put some of this stuff on the W-2. Okay. And then in the earnings code, you're going to see one here as well. Because if you look at the earnings codes, you also have apply to box 14 on W-2 for your earnings codes. So again, that's where if you're giving them something that needs to go on the W-2, you can get there that way as well. So again, that's kind of your deduction information and then your earnings codes. Okay. Then the last thing on that we want to talk about before we actually do the year end is, again, it doesn't really have to do with the year end closing as much as the W-2s, and we're going to look at those as soon as we close the year. But if you want, on the W-2 itself, there is a box about their retirement plan. There's a checkbox on there. So that's where you want to have, if they are participating in a retirement plan, you want to go ahead and check that box, and then Atrix will check the appropriate boxes on your W-2 and the different tabs that they need, for taxes, and stuff like that. So it'll check that box on the W-2. Then when we start talking about Atrix, and again, a lot of our clients are pretty much using Atrix because, it's just easy. You can reprint from there. It's by the time you pay for postage these days and buy all your forms, it pretty much nets out, the same type thing, plus the ease. You don't have to sit and stuff a bunch of envelopes and, take them to the post office and all that other stuff. So a lot of people are doing Atrix. Atrix has a couple different ways, it kind of does it for you, but one of their services that actually saves you a little bit of money is if I also go over to my taxes. Over here, you can electronically file. So that's what these W-2 consent boxes are, the W-2 consent and the 1095 consent. These are consents that the employee has signed, so you can actually email them their W-2 instead of physically mailing it. Now, the employee should be filling out a consent form for you to do that because, technically you guys mail those every year. But if they sign that consent, you can send them electronically using Atrix, and it is a little bit less per W-2 if you do the e-filing, which is the electronic filing with Atrix, instead of Atrix actually mailing the W-2s in your behalf. So that's, also towards, this is all geared towards the Atrix and the W-2 filing. So we're going to go ahead and pause here for a minute and see if anyone's come up with any questions. I'm thinking not. Dee, do we have any questions?
I'm sorry. One question. Do we have to set up the 2025 year before closing payroll modules? That's the only question we have.
No, as soon as you post to 2025, it'll go ahead and create it for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, now I'm going to go through the year-end processing.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Another one just came in. Can we stop for a second? It
Sure.
says my option to reset balance at year end is grayed out in the setup. Why is that?
It's because you probably don't have a limit. So if you go, and depending on what version you're on, if you're on older version, it may not be applicable yet. I can't remember exactly when that happened, but let me go ahead and show you down here. If I go to setup, deduction. So see how my loan is grayed out right now? As soon as I put in a dollar amount there, I'm sorry, a limit, not the amount, the limit. So let me do 1,000 here. That's what it opens up. So you have to have something in the standard limit before that opens up. Okay, and if that's not working for you, then you need to get on a newer version of Payroll because it was an update in one of the latest updates. I'd have to go back and look at my notes to tell you if it was 2023 or 2024, but they did open that up. I'm assuming it was 2023 because I didn't do the payroll last year and it was already kind of in the handout, so I assume it was available last year as well. So, okay. So hopefully that answers all the questions. Now, again, I'm going to go ahead and go through year-end processing, okay? And when I do that, you do want to make sure, and Dee's going to talk about it, and I'm sure you've gotten lots of emails from us and everything else, but if I go over here to my, on my ribbons up here, if I go to the help ribbon and go to stage about, if I click this, it's going to tell me what version I'm running of Sage, what product update, and what payroll version I'm running, okay? Again, Sage always supports kind of 3 years back, okay? So the supported versions for Sage right now on their website is 2024, which is payroll 2.24, okay? 2023, which is payroll 2.23, and 2022, which is payroll 2.22. Now, in addition to that, you could still run Atrix if you're still running 2021, okay, but you can't do the IRDs. So if you're on 2021, we're going to highly suggest that you update, okay, or upgrade to a newer version. But Sage always goes so many 3 versions back. Okay, so when they drop 2025, then technically the 2022 is going to also drop off. So every time they add a new version, they take one away. Okay, so you do, but if you go over there to the help and the about, that'll tell you what that is. Okay, so so you can go look at your system to see which ones you're on. Okay. Okay, with that all being said, now I'm going to actually do the period end processing. Okay, so again, I'm verifying my date. It's 12/31/2023. Okay, then on page 2, let me get you caught up on your documents. So if I go over here, we've finished all of this. Okay, then if I go down here and I start this is your next page. Okay, so we're going to start on page 2 here, I believe. Okay, So now I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and go back to Sage. So now page 2, you could actually, do file, print, and make some copies, especially if you're new to Sage, and kind of use it as kind of a checklist. That's kind of why we have the comments and complete. If you've been doing this for 10 years, you probably don't even use, a checklist because you kind of got it all in your head. But we do provide that where you could put some comments and make some notes and do some different things there. Okay. Also, as I'm doing the demonstration, if I say something, you could write, a little note there on your paperwork just so you know to check it or to add it to your processes if you use a different type of checklist. Okay. I'm a huge proponent for checklists. Even if you do it repetitiously, you can sometimes get distracted because someone comes in, bothers you, whatever. So I'm a huge proponent for checklists. But anyway, so now that very first section up there says, before performing year-end closing, verify all payrolls for the fourth quarter have been processed, printed, and posted. Okay, verify that daily transaction file has been updated to the general ledger. And so what that means now, for all processing, all payrolls, you need to think about bonus runs. Okay, so if you're going to do a bonus run, you got to do it before you close the year if you want it included in the 2023 or this year 2024 W-2s. Okay. You also need to make sure if you're doing fringe benefits, like some of our clients offer, their officers or, people like use of company cars, and different types of fringes, whether, whatever those are. And those have to be processed in addition to one of your payrolls in December. Okay, because you can't do a fringe after you've paid them all for the year because it's trying to take out taxes. And if you've already given them all their paychecks, you have nothing to take out. Okay, it's going to calculate the tax, but it's going to be a negative check because you don't have any earnings to match that. So if you're doing fringe benefits or anything like that, you have to have dollars or pay amounts to take the taxes from. Okay, so you always want to make sure that if you're doing fringe benefits and stuff, that they're included, in with the other pay in December. Okay, so just be mindful of that as well. And then some people do this periodic time off accrual instead of having the system accrued on their own. And that's when you'd have to do that. You could run that if you do your accruals that way. And again, you want to do that to apply those before you close or whatever you're going to do. So you just need to be careful, not just paying them their regular paychecks, but you got to think about all the extras, bonus runs, fringe benefits, paid time off, those time off codes, etc. So you got to think about all that. You also should make sure every time you're doing stuff is make sure that the daily transaction register is empty. And that you could do pretty easily up here in the main. And if you go down to the daily transaction register, that's just that last step that walks the debits and credits over to the general ledger. Those need to be in the general ledger before you close your GL, okay? They should be there before every month, especially if you're doing, your processing. But you can hit print there. And if anything comes up, which mine looks like it has, this should be updated before, and this was before I started creating the test companies, because obviously that didn't hit back in April. So that's an oopsie on my part. That should have already been ran. But if I close that, then it's going to ask me if I want to update, that information. So you should have everything updated to the general ledger before you start this process as well for the year end. Okay, so, but you can always check it either from the daily transaction here. Now, on a side note, I know we're talking about payroll today, but every single module has this daily transaction register. And if you don't want to go to every module you process in and check it, just a hint, if you didn't know this already, if I come up here to the general ledger, I can run it from here. Because if you think about it, general ledger doesn't really have a daily transaction register. As soon as you print your journal entries, they just ask, do you want to update? So the reason they put this daily transaction register in the general ledger is to check the other modules. So as a general rule of thumb, every time you do a month-end close for your general ledger, the very first thing you should do is click this little daily transaction register and make sure everything has been updated from all the other modules. And it will come back and say the file is empty, okay, if there's not any unposted data out there. Now, if I go back to my payroll module and run the daily transaction register now, it's going to say it's empty because I went ahead and updated it, okay? So you do always want to check that, okay? So, and I got to make a note to fix my demo data because that would be an oopsie in a real live situation, because I've got April stuff that's sitting out there unposted and I'm trying to close December. That would be a uh-oh. So, but anyway, so that's our first, section there, is just make sure everything's done and make sure everything's been posted. Okay, then the next little bullet point there says any report you wish to run or keep as part of the period end processing, needs to also happen. Okay, so in payroll module, underneath period end processing, there is this period end report selection. Now, what this does, it's going to tell you what reports you run, okay, every time you do a close. Okay, now, in my example, I just have a handful of them out here, okay? If I ever wanted to reset them back to factory default, you can click this button down here on the bottom left to see what's there. But these reports vary from client to client, okay? We would always recommend, we're going to go through the reports we recommend here in a minute, but, anything having to do with the quarter, I would definitely print, okay? And I would assume the majority of you guys are using Paperless Office. Paperless Office was introduced into Sage several versions ago. And when it first came out, I was a little bit leery of it. But then when I started using it, I'm a huge proponent of it. And I will get on my soapbox and tell you every single day how much it is important to go to Paperless Office. Because 25, 26 years ago, I used to be an end user. And when I was an end user that many years ago, you could not do Paperless Office. So I was the one in the accounting office that printed everything. And then after I printed it, I stuck it in a bin. And then once a week, I would put that in order by date, by module, by, process, check register, invoice register, whatever I was doing. And I have to file all that stuff, punch it, stick it in my notebooks, do all that other stuff, okay? Paperless Office removes all that process, because as you're posting in Sage, it's creating PDFs, and all those PDFs are being saved. So huge blessing to have Paperless Office, okay? And if you have Paperless Office turned on for your period end reports, when we go through the process, nothing prints to the printer. It all goes to paperless. Okay, then you can find them in the viewers underneath Paperless Office for period end reports. Okay, now, another thing to take mind of is the report setting. Okay, every report you run, the default out of the box from Sage is called the standard setting. Okay, but you could do a lookup here and see any other settings that you have set up. So this one only has one because it's pretty cut and dry. It's just a quarterly report. Well, this pension plan history report, when we look at it in a minute, when you run the default version of the pension plan history, it is all years, okay? So that report's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger every time you run it. So this one, I have a setting here, and my setting has 1/1 to 12/31, and then I'm just going to get that on my information when I do my period end close. And I'll go into the settings here in a little bit as we actually look at a report. But basically what you're doing is, for every module, you have the period end report selection, and you can pick and choose whatever report you want. Okay, you can click here and look for other reports. Okay. The only caveat here is you can't do custom like Crystal reports. They won't show up. But these are all the reports within Sage. Okay. And you can pick and choose what you want to print as part of your quarter end or year end process. And you can also pick which setting. Okay. I call those like memorized report settings, right? And you may want to do it by employee in one case, by department in another. So depending on your needs or the way you like the output of the report, some of the reports have an option to do condensed or landscape. But the one out of the box may be landscape, but you like condensed. So you would set up a new setting with that checkbox checked, so you don't always have to remember it. And what's good about these is when you start the period end processing, because they're going to paperless, they don't even pull up. You don't even see them. They just run in the background and go to your viewer, okay? So you really can't change these before you run the report. So that's why they have this option here called period end report selection. So you basically set up any report you want to run and you verify the setting. Okay, once those are set, we can still edit somewhat during the period end or the year end processing, but you do want to make sure you check which report you're running. Okay, so that's that second part. Any report you wish to print as part of the year-end process must be listed on the payroll period end report selection. Okay, a reset default, we talked about that. And then just be mindful that you can have different type of settings or memorized report sections, selections with that are those reports. Okay, then there's a little note there that if you're printing the paperless office, you don't actually have to print a hard copy of these reports. They're stored as a PDF, and then you can go back in there and look at it. Okay, when you're doing period end report processing, you cannot add reports. So like if you start the process and you see one you missed, just close out of the period end process, go back, add the new report, and kind of start over. Okay, but now what we're going to do is this next little section is going to show you all the different reports that you can run, and I'm going to give you a little diatribe about each one to see if it may be important, for you. So basically, these are the reports we're about to kind of talk about. Again, there's notes over here if you want to jot down any notes, or if you see anything that you're not running currently that you might want to add to your closing process. So we're in this little section right here about the reports to print or run during the year-end close. Okay. So the quarterly tax report, so let me go up here. Here's my quarterly tax report. Okay. Again, the quarterly tax report, if you look at it out of the standard, by default, it's going to print the federal, the state, and any local taxes that you have. So again, this is where, you may want to do it. Summary is an option. Double space is an option. And then right now it's printing the Social Security last 4 digits. Well, if you don't want that on your report, you could click this to no and save the setting. So therefore you're not doing, that information on the report. Okay, now this one does kind of keep up with you every time you close. This stuff rolls forward. Again, a reason why, closing is important is because this keeps up with you. So we already closed quarter 3 at the end of quarter 3. Now we're in quarter 4. Okay, so again, this is the quarterly tax report. If I go ahead and preview this bad boy, because I did the default, I'm going to see all the different stuff. So if you notice, if I make this report a little bit bigger, federal is first. So up here in the top left, it says federal taxes. Okay. If I go through these pages, it's still showing federal, 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 federal. Okay. And then when I go to page 6, it switches to California. Okay, so all the federal ones go first, and then the state ones go. Okay, and it's just basically giving you the employees, and this is broken out by department. There are a couple different sort options you can do, and it's going to show you all the people in there. It shows you the quarter to date and the year to date. Okay, and then it's going to show you, totals down at the bottom of these. But then you have states. Now, this company is a demo company, and it's got a lot of states. So we're going to, when we do Atrix, we're going to ignore some of those states because it's a little bit intensive. But then if I jump to page 10 here, you're going to see that it switched to Colorado. Okay, so it did 4 pages of Colorado, all that other stuff. And then anything that's local starts after all of that. And look here, I've got to go all the way to page 56 to get the local stuff. So again, this is a demo company. It was done when payroll first went to 2018, and they have the gamut of cities and states and local and everything. So again, we're going to bypass some of that when we actually do the Atrix, so we don't have to deal with all that. But obviously, if you deal with that many states, you would have to deal with it. You can't just bypass it like I'm going to. But anyway, but then you see, like this is for the Manchester, VI, Ohio local taxes. I have sympathy for Ohio and California, people that have to process in those 2 states because they have a lot of local taxes. So, but anyway, but then at the very end of it, it's going to give us, totals and everything for, this goes all the way into Pennsylvania local taxes. So God help you if your quarterly tax report is 61 pages long, but I get it. So, okay, so that's your quarterly tax report. Now, if I go back to the front of this, sometimes you will notice that there might be a asterisk. Let me move this box here. I don't think you can see it. But there's some asterisks over here. If you ever see an asterisk in the VAR column, it's basically there's a variance between the calculated tax amount and the actual deduction is detected. Okay, I think it has to be at least 5 cents for it to even print the asterisk on here, so it has to be at least 5 cents to do it. I believe IRS isn't even flagged by it unless the variance is greater, than $1 or something like that. Most of the time that might happen if you do some manual taxes in the system, okay? If you're manually keying amounts in there and stuff. But, that's what that asterisk means. On the federal, reports, it's primarily a difference between the amount of employee Social Security tax withheld and calculated, and the calculated amount of wages subject to Social Security. That could produce one of those. On the state and local report, sometimes it's a difference between the employee and the employee disability insurance stuff. But again, it's only going to show up in certain cases. So if you're getting a bunch of those, then you might want to do some research, to kind of see how things are being calculated and stuff. But if you notice, it's just a little handful of people here. So, but anyway, so that's the quarterly tax report. Okay. Another report we recommend you run is the check history report. Now, this is a good candidate. If you go to the check history report, it defaults to the current calendar year and quarter. So if you're printing the check history report as part of your period in processing, then having this is okay, because then, like when I ran quarter 3, it was in quarter 3. So the information in my paperless office period in report showed quarter 3. Once I closed quarter 3, it's now showing quarter 4, right? So that's okay, and it just kind of keeps up with it. But what some people may want is they may want to have, and let me just show you. So this is my check history report. So if I just preview it standard out of the box, this is what it's going to look like, okay? It's page breaking by department and stuff like that. And then if you notice the report itself, it's just showing total gross hours, federal, Social Security, and all the checks that the employee got, okay? So now if I close this, if I want to show earnings, deductions, taxes, recaps, direct deposit information, see, I can click all these. Now, those weren't available in the standard report. So if I preview this and I like this setting better, then that's my indication that I need to go ahead and create a setting, because I like it broken out like this, I still get the check information on that top line, but then I get all the other information, right? So if you like this better, then that's your cue that now that I checked all these boxes, every time you run this check history report, you don't want to have to remember to go check all those boxes, right? So that's the prime candidate to change the standard setting to something else. So that's when you would come in here and you would drop this down and you would do save as, and I would call it something else. So I'm going to call it check, HIST, detail. Okay. And then once I tab off of there, I can tell it, if it's a public setting. So public means that any other user code can see this report selection and choose it to view data using your report selection. Private is your user code only can see it. And if you do read only, other people can see it. They can use it, but they can't uncheck one of your settings. So like if they want to run it and try to uncheck one of these, they can't do that because it's going to be a read only. They have to go with the check boxes you have. Okay. And then if you like it, you can always make it be your default report. So if I click OK, then this is going to print with all these boxes checked. Then if I close this report, the next time I go into the check history report, because I saved it as a default, all my boxes are checked. And I don't have to remember to go check before I print. Okay, and again, if you're running the check history report as part of your quarter end process, and you're using the standard default, when you run it, it's going to look like we just looked at when we did this standard. Okay, it's not going to look at, it's not going to have all these earnings and deductions. And if you notice, I have a couple different ones in here. I also have one called yearly. And this difference is, if you notice, this says by year and quarter, right? So then, but if I pick the yearly one, it's running by check date range and it's got the year in it. Okay. And it's also doing some of the information. But that's what those report settings are all about. Okay. So you definitely, if you're not taking advantage of report settings, you want to start looking at that. And it saves you time, trouble, clicks, stuff like that. And you can do it for all the modules, just not the payroll. It's not only limited to payroll. Okay. There's also a quarterly pay period recap, which is right here. Again, it defaults to your current, quarter, and it's doing department detail, right? But you could always change those if you need to. But this is just more of a recap information, so it's not as with all the check type stuff, all the check information, just recaps. Then you have some people print the earnings and the deduction reports. Again, the earnings and the deduction reports, if you look at those, and you may not want to do the earnings reports every quarter, but at the end of the year, you might want to do it. Okay, so, but you can pick and choose, see how it goes to 2023 quarter 4, but you could always change it. I can change it back to 2022 as long as my information or my history is still being maintained. Okay, but there's your quarter 4. But again, if you want this part of your period end paper that we're saving to PDF, you would want to run these. So, and you can do a range of earnings codes down here. By default, it does all. But if you only want to include a certain ones, again, that's where you'd put in the earnings codes that you want to keep on this report and then save it as a different setting. Okay, the deduction report is pretty much the same. It's just reverse. I mean, earnings are what we're giving them. Deductions are what we're taking out. Same type thing, looks the same. You can do the same deductions down at the bottom and save it as a setting. So those are some of the reports that come with it. There's also the pension plan history. The pension plan history is going to show you check number, hours worked, earnings, and totals. So if I go to my pension plan history report, again, this does have some selections. It's going to do all deductions unless you click selected deductions, and then see, you can come in here and select. So I'm not printing them all. I just chose a couple that I want. Okay. And so it's saying that, I'm doing selected deductions, and I can, do different things. And this one, I actually did a date range down here, because the default, if I go to the standard, it's doing all check dates. So again, just be mindful of some of these reports, especially if you like them and you want them included. Are you creating lots of data out there that you really don't need? If it's always going back every year, do you really need it for this particular quarter end or year end close? Okay. So, but anyway, those are the pension plan. The pension plan audit, it's a newer report. It always hasn't been out there. Again, I can't tell you what version because they keep changing them. But this one actually will show you, it kind of shows you the earnings. There's a earnings for the employee, then it shows you the columns of the deductions. And so you can see what their earnings were and then what part of those deductions went for each one. So see, you can see like on this check, the earnings were $2,500 and it went to the 401k percent. So it's kind of called an audit report because you can see the grand totals and the dollar amounts per deduction code. So you can kind of make sure and do an internal audit. Is that the right amount? Is it based on her percentage? Stuff like that. So, but you can kind of see it that way. So that's kind of what that pension plan audit report is. Workers' compensation report is another one. Not many people in Texas use that because they pay an insurance company for workers' comp, but the payroll module can calculate and do a debit and a credit for workers' comp. Again, most people don't do that. The time off accrual report, we have a note about that one. So if I go to the time off accrual report, it's the same information as an employee maintenance, okay, but it's in report format. So if I preview this is where we're going to see, if I go down here in Adrian Bullock, this information, the 160, the 80, the 20, the 91 used in that available 989, those are the same things that I saw when I pulled up that employee maintenance and looked at the benefits tab. So it's basically the same information down there on the bottom of the employee, but it's in report format. And it also gives you a dollar value to those benefits. Okay. So that's the time off accrual. And again, this will reset, to year end if that's how your system's set. It's going to be done based on the calendar year. Okay. The quarterly unemployment report, that one is down here. It's like the old government quarterly one prior to version 2018, but it's in report format, not in the filing format. So you basically go to Atrix to get the new filing format, but this would be it's just in report format. And again, this will do federal and state, okay? So, but again, this is kind of just in report format, not in the actual filing format that you provide. The liability report, these are some, because they're down at the bottom, they're newer anyway. But like this tax liability report, this one right here is going to show you the employer tax liability by quarter and year. And again, you can do it based on just federal, state, local, however you want to do it. It defaults to be, by check date range, but you can change it year and quarter or leave it at check date range. And this is just your tax liability report. Okay, so it's showing you the tax amount. And then if you notice this next one, this is a newer one, the tax history report. The tax history report shows taxes, taxable wages for employee and employer. So again, I can run it by check date range. I can run it by year and quarter. And depending on what I choose, then it's going to show me the information. So see, I can see the subject, the taxes, the calculated, etc. Okay. That one also you can do here if you want all disability, Social Security, family leave, Medicare withholding, etc. So that's that tax history report. Okay. Then when we actually get into Atrix, so like all the federal, the very last bullet there on some of the reports to run is the federal and state tax reporting. That's what we actually use to print the quarterly 941s, the 941Bs if you do those, and the W-2s and stuff, but all that kind of stuff is now done in Atrix. So that's done every quarter, but it's not done in Sage. It's done underneath the setup options. So when you actually get into Atrix, you start this down here, federal and state tax reporting. So all of that stuff is now done in the period end folder itself instead of as a report. Okay. Any questions so far on the report?
No, ma'am, we do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Then because it's year end, if we go back to our document, so if I go back to my piece of paper, so these are all the reports we just kind of talked about. Okay. Then if I go down here, and if I look here, there's some other reports there that you may need to review or print. Okay. One is the general ledger posting recap. It is cleared based on the years to retain your general ledger history. So again, especially if you're getting, say you're as a default or you're keeping, 10 years of data for all your modules. Well, when you're getting to that 10th year, that's when you may want to start printing some of these reports actually to a PDF or something, even though, because you're about to lose some history. So anytime you're about to lose history, you can go ahead and either print the reports and archive those reports before the system purges history, or if you have your payroll history set to do like every 10 years, then you might want to every 10 years, then go create a backup company. So, and if you call it, your 10-year backup for, whatever year it is, then every 10 years you'd create a backup. So then you could go to that backup company to see some of that information, because in your live company, it's now going to fall off. So that's what some people, instead of making backups of their company every single quarter, every single year, they just do it when that magical number of years to history is about to fall off. That's when they do a backup. Okay. So, and then you could just set up a new company and just do it as an archive. So then you'd still have all that stuff on the screen for the years you're about to close in your live company. Okay, so, but that's kind of, but those reports are just these little ones right here, the general ledger, that check history report. Again, it's being purged based on the number of years. We did kind of talk about it already. The pay rate change report, that one, and the employee audit report. So those are things that, especially if your years are about to fall off, that's when you might want to go ahead and run those to either PDF or save them somewhere so you have them. Okay. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and close this bad boy and go back and look at what we've done. So again, my date is 12/31/2023. Okay, I've already checked to make sure what period end report selections I'm going to run, and then I'm going to go to period end processing. So when I do period end processing, payroll, period end, and year end processing is going to be done for quarter 4. Okay, print the reports. Now that means they're going to print to paperless. Okay, or your printer, depending on if you're not using period end reports in paperless. Okay, if I uncheck this, it's going to close the quarter, but nothing is going to be printed. So you do want to make sure the print payroll reports is turned on. If I do proceed here, it is going to show me what reports I'm running and whatever report setting I have. Okay, so again, I can't change this. I can't click there and change it. So if you want to make a change at this point, that's when you would just close this, get out of it, go back into that option for the period end report selection and edit what you want and or settings before you get to this point. Okay, you could also bail on a report. Okay, so say you don't want to run one of these reports, you could just at that point in time just I'll undo this one. Okay, so if I undo it, then it's just going to print these 5 to paperless instead of all 6 of them. So again, I still have a little bit of editing type information here. But when I hit print, it's not going to this printer. This printer is just the saved printer with these reports. So if you go to Paperless Office, pull up the report and hit print, it's going to go to this printer. Okay. But nothing's printing to that printer. It's basically all going out to Paperless Office. So it's just going to run these reports here. And they all go, you kind of watch them go. And again, how fast it goes is depending on your number of employees. You know, your pay, if you're weekly, it's going to take a little bit longer because there's more checks, you know, information instead of if you're biweekly or semi-monthly. Really can't tell you how long it's going to take. You know, you'll know after you do 1 or 2 closings, stuff like that. And see, it's running all these reports. Okay, now it's saying Q4 is going to be changed to Q1. Now, I'm going to stick a pin in this real quick. If I go over here to Paperless Office, let me just show you where it's at. If I go to Paperless Office, and if I go to my period end report viewer, I put in my module and see these dates here, period end date from. Okay, my demo company is back in 2023. So I'm going to have to do my 2023 here in order to see the information. There's all my reports. Now, if you're not on version 2024 in Sage, I don't think you see this report setting because that is a newer setting. I do like that. That's in some of the newer upgrades. It basically tells you not only what report it is, but what setting was used, which is also helpful. But these are all the reports I ran. So if I open one of these, there they are. Okay. So, but that's kind of what that does. But these are all my reports. Now, if I look for, you know, 01/01/2024, I haven't done anything. So there's nothing there yet. Okay. So again, the period end date is the actual date or the module date that you closed. Even though I'm doing it on today, it's going to show me 12/31/2023, refresh. These are the actual ones. Now, it was created on 12/12/2024, but my period end date is 12/31/2023. Okay. So, but that's where all those, if you're doing paperless, where all those go, which is way more helpful than you doing it all manually. Okay. Now this is saying period 4. Okay. Q4, 12/31, going to be changed to 1/3/31/2024. And when I say yes, kind of watch the screen, you're going to see everything we first started this whole morning conversation with start to go. So if you say yes here, it's going to go ahead and start it, and it's updating direct deposits. It's purging payroll history. It's going through all those things we talked about, what it does during a year-end close. And you see it all working here. Okay, so now that it's done, if I go into payroll, and if I go check my setup options, (2024) period 1. Okay. Now, if I go look at my employees, I pull up Adrienne Bullock. I go over here to her direct deposit. Direct deposit year to date 0. Okay. If I go to her benefits, this was reset 12/31/2023. And these are the hours. She hasn't accrued anything for 2024. She hasn't used anything for the new year. This is her limits. This is what she was able to carry over. So therefore, that's what her balance is. Okay, so all that stuff was reset. Okay, her deductions, if I go to her deductions, her 401k was reset back to 18,000, so she can go try to get it all this year. Okay, maybe change her amount, do whatever she wants. Okay, and then if I look at her loan, she still owes me $3,650. So we didn't want this one to reset back to the 5,000. Okay, because she's already paid us some back. Then if I look at this one, there's nothing there, but it's still here because at one point she was getting employer contributions within the number of years we're keeping history. So this one is not gone. Okay. If I go look at her pay history, it is now in 2024. Okay. I can still go back to 2023 and see it all. Okay. I can still go back, to all these other years, but at some point after my numbers reached, my years of keeping history, it's gone. Okay. So again, it's going to go back in there and check all that stuff. Okay. Terminated employees, again, they may go away because they have to get your historical restraints first. So he's still here. So he will drop off eventually, but it has to be based on the last date he got checks or information and our number of years. Okay. Then if I go look at my Delaney person, I think her deduction is gone. Margaret Delaney. Deductions. Her loan is now gone. So, because it surpassed the number of years. So it did finally go away. Okay. Now again, with that being said, now that I've done it, before I start doing my payroll, I may have to think about your insurance. So say your insurance has gone up for the new year, okay? You may have to go change the amount that's going to be deducted from the employees for your new year. So just because I did the whole year-end processing and everything reset based on SAGE standards, you may still have to go in and edit any deduction codes for plan increases, for health insurance, any new things like that. So you got to kind of think about that little checklist too that you have to do. And again, that's going to be different for every single company. Does that, any questions so far, Deanna, or is everyone good?
Doesn't look like we have any questions, Eva. Thank you.
Okay, so now the last little part of this is I'm going to go through the Atrix. So again, there are on that third page, these are your period end notes. We do have some notes in here just so you remember, and we're going to try to beat it into your head like a dead horse, that you do want to make sure you check all those stuff and do period end in your live company before you start the next payroll. Okay. The tax table updates, again, after you download those, every time you upload them, now just word of caution, Sage is not even going to release the latest Atrix stuff until I think December 20th. So, so you're not even going to see like the Atrix when we pull it up in a minute. It's going to say 2024 because that is the newest thing out there. I'm still going to run mine for 2023 because that's the year I closed to show you my example. But that 2024 date for like the W-2s and the 941s, that's not even going to be changed until Atrix makes that change and they roll that out. So you will see as you go into your payroll module, you may get reminders that tax table updates are changing. And into January, every time you go into Atrix, it's probably going to ask you for an update or even payroll for that matter, because there's going to be lots of changes. If you notice it's usually always Ohio, Pennsylvania, some of the ones with lots of local type stuff that you're seeing all those changes to. But anytime there's a change made federally or within states or any type of processing for municipal locality, locations and stuff, that's when you're going to get prompted, hey, there's a new update. Okay. So that's kind of what that is. And then here's state unemployment. Now that I've closed it before my first year, I may have to go, well, every person has to go update their state unemployment rate because there's no way Sage can indicate what your state unemployment rate is. And even if you're in the same state, Texas, your unemployment rate is going to be totally different than the company across the street. Okay, because it all depends on your turnover, and different things within the state. So all this stuff always kind of tells you about that kind of stuff on that last page. Okay, now in Sage, where you do that is if you go down here to our setup, and if I go to the company tax group setup, that's where I'm going to find some of those rates. So if I come in here and get like a Colorado, okay, when I go to the tax rates, that's going to be my unemployment rates and stuff that I have to do. So these have to be changed every single year. And you can actually, add a new line if you needed to and change the date. So if you notice, this Colorado unemployment tax rate has two different dates. So in 2016, it was 2%. Then in 1/1 of 2017, it went to 3%. But this effective date is checked. In the older versions of payroll, we had to tell you as soon as you close the year, then go change it. But you get that letter from the state prior to, January 1. So you can go ahead and go update this as soon as you get that letter, okay? And you just put the effective date to be 1/1 of 2025 once you get that letter. So if you already have your letter with your new unemployment rates, you can go ahead and go to the state and set it up and do it. Just put in an effective date of 1/1/2025, okay? So, but you can do that now, and you don't always have to remember to do it at the last minute. In the newer payroll, you can do it as soon as you get that notification, okay? But you do have to check those rates. And then anytime you do run a payroll update, and we tell you kind of in the payroll class and stuff like that, but there is in the utilities, there is a payroll status check. Anytime you get a tax update, you can download it and run it. The tax report will tell you what changes were made with that latest update. And then this tax status is where you can actually check your data, and it does a check on this. Okay, so like my tax service is okay, my employees are okay, my tax profiles are okay. This company tax groups has a warning. Okay, and if I look at that, it's saying that Massachusetts is missing a rate. Okay, so if I go over here to the tax rates, it's either missing a rate somewhere in here, in there. So it's going to tell you what's wrong with this, or a GL account. So it's going to tell us, what's wrong with our system and where we have to fix it. So again, that is, especially at the end of the year, you might want to run this payroll status in case there's some funky tax update that happened that you need to address, or add a GL account, or change a rate, or something like that. So, but those are the couple things that are all kind of listed on that last page. Okay. Then the very last note on that page of your handout is about the utilities module down here. Also, there's some purge. It's going to purge date periodically based on your number of years. But say you have your number of years in payroll set to 99, and you've decided that that's excessive, and you changed it to be 10. Okay, you could go get rid of some of those other years manually. So you can purge manually. The system's going to do it based on the number of years, but you can do it if you ever wanted to. And that's where you can also purge like the audit report. So, but again, those are just things that's a good time to evaluate whether or not, you can do some data cleanup. So, okay. Any questions so far? Are we ready to show the matrix?
We are ready for that matrix, Eva.
Okay, so again, the matrix, I would assume that the majority of you on the call are using matrix. It's pretty much the same. If you've done it once, you've done it, over and over again. But if I go over here to the federal, state, and tax reporting, that's when, and again, you're going to want to kick it off from your, like I said at the very beginning, from your live company. Okay, so even if you did an archive, do these from your live company, because in Atrix, it saves it also per company code when you go back in there for reprints and stuff. But if I do federal, let's go ahead and do the W-2s first. And this says, This one right here is my W-2 2023. Okay. It's defaulting to 2024 quarter one because I already closed it, right? But I can change this back to 2023 and I can pick quarter four. Just a second here. There you go. Oh, it's for my year 2023. That's right, because it's just the year. Sorry about that. I'm sitting here thinking quarters. Okay, but anyway, so here is my here's my 2023. I'm gonna do proceed here. You only do those once a year. I had a brain lapse. This Atrix, sometimes every time I do demo companies, sometimes it really gives me fits and I just want to throw it in the trash, but because this demo company is all over the place. But hopefully it's going to behave today. Okay, so here is, it's saying, you know, our reporting year is 2023, but my form is 2024. Okay, that's fine. Obviously, you guys wouldn't be doing this. It's just my demo data, so don't worry about that. But the form that's released with Atrix, they don't go back, obviously. You know, you'd have to do it currently. Now, anytime you start Atrix, you get this little wizard, okay? There is a little help button over here, okay? If you notice that, the little question marks, you can click it, and it's going to kind of go through this big old long diatribe about all the history out there. So if you get stuck in Atrix at any point in time, you can always hit that little question box up at the top, okay? I can either do a test drive with my first 25 employees. I can do a test drive on all my employees if you just want to kind of look at it and see where you're at. Or you can actually start processing your W-2s, okay? So, and if you do a test drive, it even tells you down here, it shows you the process, but it doesn't save any of your information. So obviously, you know, you'd want to do it live in your live one. But if you want to do a test drive just to look at it and play around with it, see where you're at, you can do that too. Okay, so here's my company FEIN number. Okay, and again, that's pulling from the certain places in Sage. I'm doing a single payroll data for this EIN. We'll go ahead and do next. Then it's going to pull up here, you know, my company name, trade name, my street address. And then if you've already done this once, you can actually save like your information, but you have to go ahead and put in your information here because it prints on the Atrix forms and stuff. Okay, and then I think I need a phone number, 214-800-5559. Okay, now I'm filing for my company. I'm gonna do next. And these are all those years I told you about. See how it's saying, you know, these are your tax account numbers. You know, if it's incorrect or if it's not working with the right way, your tax account numbers, you can, you know, edit those and go through these. And like the Colorado State unemployment is missing some numbers here. So if I just key them, obviously I'm just making stuff up, but you would put in your real numbers, but it even kind of shows you the format. So if you have your formats wrong, you can go through here and set all this stuff up and kind of go through this. That one I'm just going to do next. This one, and again, this is all this demo data when they first put out the system because they were doing all the local and the municipality type stuff and they went crazy with it. Again, I'm just trying to get through these so we can keep going. Again, they went crazy. Hopefully none of you have to process this many states and stuff because that's a lot. And again, once you save them once, it's going to keep it. But again, this is demo data and we refresh it as we go through and test and everything. So it's a little bit wonky, but it works. Okay. Now, these are some of my custom ones because see, I've got all those local stuff. you're never going to see this stuff if you don't have to do, if you don't do these types of things. Okay. So if you don't have all those, you're good. Okay. So this is just saying there's no W-2 requirements for that stuff. That's okay. Okay. So now we're into this. And for this PA Act 32, you know, you have to tell it, you know, what you're doing here and different things like that. Again, you can fix things if you need to. This is required field. Edit this. I need an account number. So I'm just going to pick something here. Again, this is all the, when they brought this, and which I'm glad Sage did, the due diligence of making sure it works for all, you know, all the crazy taxes out there, but it makes my demo data a little bit crazy. Okay. Okay, so now that I'm through all that, now this is what most of you will get. Here's, do you have employees who are exempt from any part of Medicare or Social Security? I'm going to put a no. Do you have, you know, it's just asking you members of the clergy, control numbers. So it's just kind of going through there. Again, if you click this right here, it's going to kind of start, you know, at where we're at, you know, so it's like, you know, giving you some more information of where we're talking about that help section. Okay, so it's going along with us as we move through the wizard. Okay, if you want to use a control number, you do there. I'm going to do a 941. And then again, you can fill out all this information as applicable to your company. Okay, you can truncate your employees' Social Security numbers if you'd like. And that only does it on their copies. It obviously doesn't do it on the federal. On the federal government needs to know what their number is. Okay, so now it's going through this and it's preparing my data. And when it's doing that, it's basically doing a look in. So Atrix is a bolt-on to Sage, and it's going to bolt on to the system and actually show you, you know, it's pulling from Sage. So like those changes that I made for, you know, some of those numbers and stuff, it's pulling some of that stuff from Sage and it's not filled in Sage. So anything we find, if we make a change for an employee, if you make it in Atrix and Atrix alone, then it's not a permanent change to their employee record. So any changes you have to make, you want to make note of those and actually go change them in your live database so it doesn't always keep pulling it up. Especially if you do a test drive, it'll kind of tell you what you need to fix. You can go fix it in the live. Then when you do your live stuff, it's already fixed. You don't have to deal with it. Okay, this is telling us it's preparing the employee data. It wants you to review and edit, print a copy, and then do your report submissions. If you're getting these every time and you've been doing this for, you know, year after year after year, you can put this "don't show me this" message again and it will not pop up. Okay. Now it's going to go through. So the first step it's going to do is verify the employee data. So over here on the left, it says verify employee data. There's a little blue bar. We got to make it to the end. Okay. So if I do next, it's going to look at the employee data and see if there's any issues. Okay. Now it's verifying additional employee information. So I'm going to go ahead and do next, and it's going to take a look. Now it's verifying the federal information. So it goes through and verifies. If it runs into a problem, it's going to pop up a box, and it's going to tell you to either go back and correct, or it's going to show you the information in red. So like right here, if I had a wrong address or something wrong in here, it would show that whole line as red, and you can edit it. But it's going to kind of go through and let you check it. It's even also telling you up here, you know, kind of here's that help again. So see, you can go through here, missing address line. So if you're missing anything and you get errors, you can hit that little help button over there and it'll kind of tell you what it's doing here. Okay, so it's basically kind of doing that. And as you go through this wizard, you've got those little helps and stuff. And then there's always a helps, did you know, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, it's just kind of giving you all this information. So now if I go ahead and do next, it's going to verify my state information. Okay, so now it's looking at California, you know, all the different Indiana, Kentucky, all those states that I have. Okay, then it's going to do next. Now it's verifying unassigned columns. Okay, so like some of these different things that are in here. Now, if you notice when you're doing this, here's your box 1 federal wages. There's your total up at the top in blue. So you can verify these back to the quarterly reports that you've just run as well. So, but it will give you grand totals up here per your boxes. You also get them for box 12 and box 14 and some of those other stuff. So, but anyway, you can check all that. And then I do next. Now it's going, this is your final opportunity to review or edit the employee detail. Again, you can double check to go back. So if you do double check, it's going to kind of take you back. Then it says before you print and mail or e-file, you must recheck all figures, which are included. That's if you go back and fix it. So anyway, so if there's any information, now's the time to fix it. When you do agree, that says that you've double checked everything and you're ready to go. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do agree. And then now this is going to start this information. Now this is a warning. It's saying potential issues have been highlighted in yellow. I don't really even see them in here. But if there were any, box 14 has been limited to 10 characters. So it probably cut off some of my information on there. Okay, you can print a list. You can continue without correcting if it'll let you. I mean, if it's not a big issue, it'll let you continue because it's just basically going to truncate that. Okay. Then, but you can, anytime you do get an error, another note is that there is going to be a listing of it. So you could either go back and correct and it's going to show you the information in red or yellow or whatever it is. Yellow's a warning. Red, so that was a warning that's going to truncate. Red is a no-go. You have to fix it. Okay. Then this is saying if you want to enroll, you can actually enroll from here. So if you've never done Atrix, there is a setup process. You do have to go online and create it in the Atrix document we gave you. And it's a long one. It's like 20 some odd pages. But this is like notes about it. You can only access it once at a time. Then this is everything I've been going through. So it's basically going through all that. If you get errors, I think it'll show you. So see, these were some errors. So in this case, you could either go back and correct, or you can print the list. And if you print the list, it would show you the people that are wrong. Okay, so this document kind of walks you through each of the things that we're talking about. Okay, so that's why we provide that as well every year. And again, if I do next year, it's going to start this. Now, this is saying here that it's going to print and mail my employee copies. Okay, it's going to do W-2s for 18, and these are like some of the state ones or whatever, right? And then so if I were to do this, it's going to file it. It's going to file my state reconciliation forms. So in this company, it's going to cost me $31.80. Okay, that's them doing everything, right? And again, that's going to matter on your number of employees and all this other stuff. But when you think about that, think about time stuffing envelopes, postage, buying the forms, everything else. In our Atrix documents, it also tells you where you can buy the forms from Sage. And there's a link in all the help sections. And there's actually a link to Sage's year-end stuff. And there's a direct link to buy the forms. So if you need to buy forms and you're not using Atrix, just please follow that Atrix document that we've provided, and it'll kind of get you started on that. Now, I can do other options, and that's what I'm going to do now to kind of show it to you. I'm going to print these. I'm not going to e-file because I'm not going to be charging, anything. I'm going to print my W-2 and my W-3. Okay. Now, these are saying that, many states have lowered the electronic filing requirements. That you have to do electronic filing if more than 10 returns. So again, that's why they're telling you when I uncheck those, it's saying, ooh, by law, I may have to go ahead and file those electronically, even though I said I didn't want to, right? That's how come those are popping up. But again, a lot of people go ahead and do all that stuff if they need to. But this is going to be a free version, so I can show you what they look like. Okay, and it's always going to show you your total cost down here before you go forward. Okay, so now if I go ahead and do next, it's going to pull up this, have all this stuff. Again, they're just trying to get it. You can do a complete service with them. It might be cheaper, especially if you do 1099s and W-2s. So you can always check with Atrix to see if it's cheaper to get some sort of complete service with them instead of paying individually. Now here, these are all my different states. I'm not going to go through all these. We're going to uncheck some of these, because we don't need to see all this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do next. So it is going to print my 941 W-2, my 941 W-3, the Colorado W-2, the Indiana, W-2, and whatever else it needs to do for those states, the employee W-2s, and the notice, and then your employer copies of your W-2s. So it gives you a recap of what it's about to do. So now when I do next, it's going to start pulling up all these forms. Now, again, if you're filing through Atrix and you have a login and you do it every year, once you get to the print portion, when you hit print, it's going to print out the data, but it's going to have like a copy in the shadow in the background. So once you participate in Atrix, it actually is giving you just copies, truly copies. So this is my first one, and it is the Colorado W-2. So it'll be for the employee that is in Colorado, okay? If I go to my next step, I'm not going to actually print those, but again, you would physically print them so you have a copy, or at least print to PDF so you have a copy. Then this is my Indiana W-2, okay? Again, it's going to print it. Then it's going to go to my employee W-2s. Now this one is employees. So if you notice, the employee is getting the 4 copies. Okay, so that's where either Atrix is going to do it for you, or you have to have that perforated paper that you need to buy in order to get that done. Okay, so again, that's why you want to refer to the documents there. But that's why I have many pages of these, because each person's getting a different one. Okay. So then if I do next step, and you can print, final, and that would actually print them to the printer. Okay. Now it's going to load the next one, which is the employer W-2s. And these will be less pages because these are your copies. So you're getting multiple people, you're getting 4 people per page. Okay. So then I'm going to do next step. Please insert the blank 4-part perforated if you're going to print these yourself, right? And it thinks we are, because I didn't say anything about that. Then here's my 941 W-2. Here's my W-3 with all my numbers, my number of employees, my totals. So these are all of your copies and stuff. Nope. This is something for Colorado. Okay, now this, see how it says red? So this is similar to the 10-9, to the 941s you do. 5304.46. So again, as I fill this in, anything in red, I have to do, okay? So again, they kind of walk you through there. And now if I agree, it would do that. And then here's my Indiana one. I'm probably going to have to do something on it. Okay, so I got to put in how much I paid in. Oh, 3,92146. Okay, and it's empty. So then I'm going to do next step. I agree. Then the last thing is the notice. So if you are producing them yourself, you need to give them the instructions. This is the instructions. It prints on one page, but you can make multiple copies of it. So, but that's their filing status. Okay. Then once you're done, it's going to come back and kind of say that you've, done all this. So see everything, what I've done and all these different things. And then again, once you do this, I could either start over, and then if you ever had to reprint, you can come back in here and reprint. For the year, you could reprint, just certain people and stuff like that through Atrix. So, but it kind of walks you through the whole wizard. And again, we do have some notes on that in the big handout. Okay. In the federal state tax reporting, that's where, and you do it every quarter, but that's where you can also do your state stuff. And then that's where you can also pick like your 941s. So all the different reports that you have to run, these are all the federal forms. And then if I pick a state, you can do all the state forms applicable as well. Okay. Dee, we got any questions?
Eva, we do not have any questions, dear.
Okay, well, there you go. And you know me, I can talk forever. So I've got you 5 minutes here. So, that's the steps basically. Again, you do have those handouts. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to Dee. You could always send, us an email. You can go to Mass Support. So we are here to help you through that process, and we wish you the best during that process. And hopefully we've answered any question you might have.
Yeah, Eva, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise in this area. And like she said, if you need anything, let us know. You should have received an email outlining year-end requirements. You'll get another email after this webinar with the recording, and a subsequent email from me reminding you again of your of the things required to process your year-end. But let us know if you have any questions, and we hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.